Tonight's Remarketer of the Year follows in that legacy program because in the independent auction community, you have auctions that are often passed down from one generation to the next. And some of those acts aren't easy to follow. Because if your mom and dad started that auction, or maybe started even a number of auctions before them, and then you're taking the mantle, let me tell you, you walk in a big shadow, and tonight, that's what we deal with, but no longer in a shadow. Your recipient tonight is going to cast a shadow of his own. And to be transparent, your recipient of the Remarketer of the Year award, Eric Autenrieth, has by and large been in the auction business his whole life. He grew up a traditional upbringing that a son or daughter of an auction owner follows, which is parking cars, shining shoes at the auction, sometimes selling snow cones, doing whatever the auction needed. And that was at the Ohio Auto Auction, which his father had started a number of years ago. And you go back in history, and that auction was sold at some point in the 90s to General Electric. And if you go, many of you in the room might not remember, there was a time where the three auction chains were Anglo-American, which is the group I was with, Manheim, and GE. GE was really big in the auction business. In fact, they were all the same size. You get into the middle 90s, they each had 22 locations. Manheim bought GE auctions, and then they never looked back. Then Manheim just became the 900-pound gorilla after that, and has been a great steward doing that. But the Stanley family, Henry Stanley, Eric's father, and mother Patty, sold the Ohio Auto Auction to General Electric. And when you sell an auction or business like that, you have to sign a non-compete, and you have to go away, and maybe you go retire to Florida, and Henry retired to Florida, and that didn't go well. Retirement and Henry Stanley just didn't mix well. You kept driving by this auction in South Carolina. It was right on the side of the freeway, and he'd take an eye, and Patty would say, don't stop, just keep going down to the west coast of Florida. But one day he stopped, and he ended up buying the auction. The family ended up buying it. And today that auction is Carolina Auto Auction, the premier auto auction of any, barring chains, independents, of any auctions. And just to complete the education on the auction side, of course, we've got salvage auctions, which you don't really talk about within the NAAA too much. You've got insurance auto auctions and Copart. You've got Ritchie Brothers auctions. You have digital auctions. I just saw Jimmy Douglas out there, who's the CEO of Plug, which is an online digital auction for electric vehicles. You've got ACV auctions, which is a digital auction. You've got e-blocks. So the auction community has gotten much different and much bigger than it was, and much more complex. Eric started out at a young age. He went off to college. He did a couple of different things. He did insurance. He did some fleet management. He did a little bit of this and that. But the auction industry draws you back, and it drew him back to Anderson, South Carolina, to Carolina Auto Auction, where he spent 2 years in each of a number of different divisions. And when I first met him, he was doing fleet lease, the commercial sales, handling your type of vehicles at Carolina Auto Auction. And that passion didn't stop because his father Henry wanted to have more than one location. So the family bought another auction in Fort Wayne, Indiana, another stalwart, multi-generational auction. And guess who was dispatched there to go cut his chops in auction management was our recipient tonight, Eric Autenrieth. So they spent 9 blissful years, I might say, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Depends on whether you like the Midwest and the cold that much. But they did grow up in Ohio, and are staunch supporters and fans of the Ohio State University and our big Buckeyes. So by cutting his background, coming into the business, he did his time as a general manager of Indiana Auto Auction. A few years ago, our firm was lucky enough to help his family sell that to ACV Auctions. Eric came back to Anderson and took the reins again of Carolina Auto Auction. Unfortunately, earlier this year, we lost the patriarch. Henry Stanley passed away after multiple bouts with cancer. And the mantle is fairly firmly handed to Eric, who has not only run his family businesses, but has worked through all the channels within the association. He's been the president of ServNet and followed his mother, who was Patty, who was also president of ServNet when we ran that organization. He's gone through all the regional chairs as president of chapters of the National Auto Auction Association, and then he's been president of the National Auto Auction Association. So everything in this industry, but he's also followed the footsteps of his mother and father, not just in the auction business, but guess who else was president of the National Auto Auction Association? His dad, Henry Stanley. And guess who else was president of ServNet? his mother, Patty Stanley. So you can see that there's a pattern here, and I think we're going to follow the pattern not only with this award, but the recipient of this very award a number of years ago, the Bobbitt Remarketer of the Year, was indeed Eric's father, Henry. So it's just ominous the way that this follows through. And of course, both Henry and Patty, as you can imagine, had been inducted into the National Auto Auction Association Hall of Fame, the next step that we'll take for Eric. When he's not doing all these auctions duties, he also went through our Auction Academy program. He's CAR certified. And on the personal side, he has 3 children. They're adult children now. 2 are still at the University of Kentucky. 1 has graduated, and he's very involved in their lives. There's no grandchildren yet, as I understand, but he's here tonight with his mother, Patty Stanley, an industry matriarch and icon in her own right, and his wife, Autenrieth. So with that, I'm going to let Eric say a few words to you. It's just an extreme pleasure and privilege of mine to introduce not only a longtime client, a multi-generational family, but a good friend of mine, Eric Autenrieth.
Thank you, Pierre. That was, man, I didn't know I had that many words about me. Thanks, Pierre. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Colin. Thank you, the Bobbitt organization, for the honor. Humbled to even be considered for Remarketer of the Year. Grateful to have won it. Fortunately, I'm the face of the organization, but it's the team that really wins this award, and well deserving of the Carolina Auto Auction. So one of the best teams in the industry. We've got a trophy case that's busting at the seam, but we're going to find a place for this one to put it right in the front. And I know the team will be excited to see us put it in there. So thank you again. Appreciate it.